I'm a bit surprised that too much people joined this presentation, because I'm also a lecturer at Vilnius University, and the first lecture I every time try to scare students, and I say that it will be very complex. You will not pass exams and things like that. So it makes the filter that only those good students that are ready for this challenge. But okay, I'm not sure that I'm going to scare you today. Okay, so I will talk about behavior-driven development today, and I'll start a bit about myself. I founded the Nicot consultant company. We are very lean, and I'm fulfilling a couple of roles. I'm CEO and CTO at once, so I'm actually more a CTO, but because we don't have a separate CEO, then I'm CEO too. So. The process we use, we actually tried at the beginning extreme programming, and it happened that extreme programming engineering was accepted very well in our team. So, and then after a few projects, actually after a few years, we started to see that there is need of management on top of it, because we are at the beginning we were just a team of technical engineers, you know, not so much a full product development, but just consulting engineering services. So later we started with some of agile management, and it was Scrum and Kanban depending on project. If it's a smaller project or it's maintenance thing, then it's more Kanban, and if it's something something bigger, which has a bit more clear scope and not so short project, then Scrum usually works best for it. And what we do is basically a few types of systems. Most of them are social apps and games. So think like Facebook applications and Facebook games. And we do a lot of mobile games, mostly for Japan market, and also there are some other types of systems that we sometimes do. Is so we call Web2 enterprise. So it's simplified, very simple, only for specific needs software for companies, not something big enterprise software, but just simplified things that usually smaller businesses needs. And also any backend heavy systems are under our interest. So the other thing that we are exceptional, it's Ruby on Rails. We do Ruby on Rails since 2006, so it was like really early days of Ruby on Rails, and in Lithuania almost no one knew about it, but somehow we picked that technology, and we also community pioneers in Lithuania. The clients, basically we are working with a lot of startups. There are a lot of very different startups, from very big ones like a Playfish, and with very small, like you know, privately funded small startups with small ideas, and it's a bit exceptional, I think, comparing with other companies that are focuses not only on startups, but maybe to running business, already running businesses, or other clients. So other thing is that questions are welcome during presentation. So the idea is I would like to make that you understand at least a bit of behavior-driven development. So for that you need, if you have questions, or if you don't agree with me, then just say that during presentation. It's okay. And who is practicing TDD? Okay, so it's like 10 or a bit more. And who thinks that you are very strong at TDD? Is there anybody? No. So, is there, I think, Actually, there is there is one because I know one guy. I believe that maybe there are a few of you that of those guys that does TDD very well, and actually. Behavior-driven development is test-driven development done right. So I'll try to explain that idea in this presentation. So basically, this is a couple of examples of BDD and TDD. So I think it's the TDD example is pretty much clear for those who do TDD. Isn't something not clear for those who does TDD because it's simply a test account class and the method test account 0, just simple name. And in the body of test, we just create account and check is balance equal to 0. Okay, it's very simple, and I think it's not hard to understand for any developer. Okay, so equivalent in behavior-driven development would be the code at the left. So it is. I think I can zoom in so everybody can see. It is describe account when first created. It should have balance of 0. And the body of test is a bit similar to the previous example. Is we just create new account and then check that the balance and say that account balance should equal 0. So the language, this is Ruby language. So this is DSL. If you understand, that's something. I mean, it's executable code. What you see here. Who thinks that this is easier to understand than this one example? Okay, why? Anybody can say?
Because on the right there's a clear assertion what you are testing.
It's clear. It's clearer for developer. You want to say that you're a developer and it's easier for you to understand, right? Okay, so is there anybody not developers, like Scrum Masters or product owners or okay, there is at the end. Okay, so can you please say which one is easier to understand for you? Okay, so this is a very clear difference because it's maybe I think. At the beginning, if you don't know that DSL, it's much easier to understand this example for a developer. But it's not possible. I think that it's not possible for a non-technical guy to understand what is it and what it does. So this one actually is. Easy to understand for developer if you know a bit of that DSL. So because it's not something fantastic. Actually, describe is just a method, and the account and when first created is parameters, and do is just opening a block, and the second line it is method name, should have balance of 0 is a parameter, and do again opens a new block. Yes. No, it's tool called Aspec. So it's very popular in a Ruby environment. So it's really not hard to understand if you are a Ruby developer, even if you was not familiar with Aspec, because Ruby allows such a nice syntax. Yes. It's very similar thing. Domain-driven development is really very similar to behavior-driven development. Yep. It's similar, but there are small aspects. Actually, when I was searching for information for this presentation, in some place I found that domain-driven development is very similar to BDD, and there was mentioned some difference, but I forgot because I'm actually not an expert of domain-driven development. So if you would like, we can discuss that after presentation in detail. What differences there is. So the next example is even more fantastic. So it is also executable test. Anybody has an idea how it's possible to execute it? I mean, machine executes it. Sorry? Yes, it is. So there are some reserved words like a feature or like scenario, like given, when, then, and the other parts of those strings can be easily matched with regex. So I'll show it a bit later how it works. So again, maybe that lady at the back can say which one do you like more between those. This one or this one? Yep. So it's this tool is called Cucumber. It's a very fun name, but it has a even more richer DSL than Aspect, and is used mostly for a storage, for a user storage. So as you see, it's not so complex to put in such way the usual user storage. Right, so it's a very good tool to automate the thing. You have a lot of user stories, and you can automate the checking of those user stories.
What about the performance?
You mean so the performance is about tests only? So you understand that? So it's not it doesn't affect production system performance, right? So it's one point. The other point is okay. Everyone knows that the tests are not super fast. If you have 10,000 tests, it will not run in 1 second, and everyone knows that, and it's acceptable. If there is need to make it faster, then usually it's very easy to scale such testing because you can just split different stories on different servers. Testing like to have 10 testing servers, right? And you will have as much as faster as 10 times. So it's not yes, it's not super fast, but it's acceptable, and it's okay in a testing environment to have not a super fast test. There are build machines and things like that. So like test passes after a couple of hours or so. It's common in a testing world. Okay, so yeah, so again the whole picture. So the next thing is where testing happens. So I really like this representation of extreme programming, because all the other schemas or just texts are pretty hard to understand extreme programming. This is very easy, just divided to 5 parts: team interaction, overall schedule, rescue planning, iteration planning, and programming. So it's much easier to see what is going in extreme programming actually. So behavior-driven development happens in a really in much more places, and is used in much more places than test-driven development. It's, as you see, it's used in a release planning. So if you have, you really can write those automated cucumber specs in release planning or after release planning sometime, because or maybe not not the full running tests like I show, but maybe just a draft of it. It will be easy later for developers to change those cucumber tests and have a good and ready to use cucumber tests. And the other thing is it's used in iteration planning and also, of course, in the programming, where TDD. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, I forgot. Okay, and test-driven development is mainly used in the programming. I think everyone agree, especially after analyzing those previous example, that those technical tests that test-driven development the developers use are really usable only in programming thing, like testing, checking does the test pass, and then refactoring, right? So in that small, yep. Check. Can you please repeat? Yep, it's okay. We can go back. He said that those tests that we have here are even in TDD, right? Those tests are like a living documentation. Yes, I agree that it is, and it's very good thing, but though if you have just such a tests, it's only usable for developers, actually. It's the business part of a product don't have much benefits of set of those tests. But if you have a test in a such written in a such manner, there is much more benefit for a business side of a product. That is one thing. The other thing that is even more important, when you do TDD, you do system level testing, right? You know, like checking numbers, small things, like checking is there function, does that return what it should return, and things like that. It is very far from a product, you know, from a product features. So when you have a BDD, you are much more closer to the product features. So it's much better documentation that the TDD has. So it's also live documentation. Yeah, but do you understand how difficult it is to put a user story in a such test? Usually user story is something big, like at least a couple days of that, right? So you don't write one test. Okay, so the idea is that I'm not sure that I fully answered your question. Maybe we can discuss after presentation. But if you understand that this is a completely technical level testing, right? And then you have a BDD, which is much more close to user stories and much more close to the business side of a product, right? So it's if you see, and the other thing, in a test-driven development, you really test system level, and in the behavior-driven development, you define a behavior of a code, right? And behavior of a code is a much more close to the user stories thing, right? Because user stories is basically also defines behavior. Yes.
I think we have also some third category. Let's say if we are talking about Selenium tests.
Yep. Yeah, so the cucumber is, I think, one step better than your approach, because it's possible to actually the main purpose of cucumber is to test at the browser level. So each step, like there is, it's not good balance, not good example, but that the steps could be like when I open some form and I fill some parameters and then we click submit, then I should have like a new account or things like that. So
It's a very simple example. Real life examples are much more different. You have lists, you know, many items with many details, and you need to know exactly in which place it is.
yeah, but the idea is that in your approach you also focus on a bit system level. I mean, it's on those details, you know. And
It's on you. No, it's user. It's from user perspective. It's exactly from user. User clicks on the button, then he sees something. And you check what he sees, what it's showing.
it, but those steps are written in a programming language, and it's not easy to read. Like just not like this. Yeah, it's same as here, but as I said, it's more like defining things like how they behave in a natural language. So it's a bit different approach. You can there is a you can just do checking and see at system level, but you will be far from product features, right? And with such approach, you are much more closer to the product features. So. Actually, after you do a TDD for a couple of years, you start to do this thing. Yeah, but not with this tool, but with your existing tools. But you write tests similar to this way. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Can you please repeat the question? Yep. Yep. Yeah. This is even easier for in a BDD, because one where is that one? Okay. So in BDD you are not sticking to the code, right? You are in a TDD you usually sticking to the internals. Yep. Okay, so you want just to remove some tests because you don't need any more that functionality? So it's even easier, because here you are much more closer to features. You just remove those features, and it means you remove those tests that are binding to those features. You know, you don't stick to the code level. Here you much more stick to the code behavior. So you can easily remove those tests that represent some features. And also the code corresponding connected with, but in your TDD also some features can be uncovered. No, in BDD you also first write this test. So you don't write unnecessary code. So if you have tests, then you have covered code. Okay, so BDD versus TDD. I tried to pick some of points that maybe will be easier for you to understand the difference. So BDD is more driving tests from user story perspective, and TDD is more driving tests from technical perspective. So other different is more specification than testing, right? And in a TDD is more usual just the hardcore system level testing. BDD usually involves a lot of roles, like product owners and test and human. I mean, not automated testers, but those that try to test via browser or so. They can also be involved in those tests. And TDD is actually for developers only, because only they understand it and only they can write it. BDD is much easier to start because it's much more clear what tests should be. So you just use your user stories as a base of those tests, and as opposite to in TDD, it's much harder because you really don't know how to test that system level. It needs a lot of your time to try and to do it right. And BDD learning is really easy because it's easy to start. And as I said, TDD is a complex thing at the low system level, and then actually after doing a few years of TDD, you start to do BDD, but with your old TDD tools. Okay, so other thing, it's focus on system behavior. How system should behave, what features it should have, and TDD is more about code design. So it's basically TDD is used to involve code design. Tests are readable in BDD, sorry, readable for not only for developers, and for TDD it's really just for developers. Other important thing that BDD brings understanding of feature being done. So you have automated user story, and it means when it passes, it means that probably most likely feature is done. And with TDD, you can test as much as you want, endless, and actually there is no sign of no any indication that some feature at business level is done. Okay, so I actually at the beginning wanted to make a big demo with web application and things like that, just a full stack of a testing, but at this point I decided that it will be better to make just a short basic BDD development example. Okay, so imagine that we have a bank account. Oh, I think we actually don't have a bank account, but we would like to have in a banking system. So okay, so what we will do, we will just create new account. Then we'll check. Okay, we did one mistake here. Okay, so what it does, it says that there is no such thing account. Okay. Oh. Okay. Okay, so we now have account but have a different error. It says there is no balance method. Okay, so what we will do, let's define it. Another. Oh, so the error is that it's not, the balance is not 0, but it's nil. it's returned by default. So what we will do, we'll do this trick. Okay, so that passed. Is everyone happy with that code? Okay, so basically, if you need such a small feature and nothing more should be added, then it should be okay. But if we just decide to add one more feature, something like okay, so it doesn't work anymore because we don't have an add method. I'll do a bit quicker. I'll just make okay, so the problem is very clear. We get balance 0 instead of 50, and that's because we just stopped that method, and we need a lot more code to make a balance really working. That should work, hopefully. Oh, there's typo. Not here, but here. Okay, so you just saw how refactoring was done of a balance method to a much more working code. Okay, so this was example with aspect. Do you have any questions of aspect? I think it's more or less clear for everybody because not so hard to understand it. And there is another example of a BDD with cucumber. Let's see. I think I have it prepared. Okay, yeah. So I just have the example that that was in the presentation, and let's run it. Okay, so it throws a lot of errors. Basically, it says like there is no steps defined. Those are regular expression-based steps. And Cucumber is really smart enough. It just gives us a very good code chunk that we just need to edit a bit. Steps, let's say, count. So in this simple, let's do it very simple. I have no, then this is step definitions. This is for developer. It's reusable step definitions that testers should use. So you define once such things, like developer writes it, but the testers use it. So tester doesn't need to define those steps. Okay. Okay, so it passes all the steps. And any questions from Cucumber? No. Okay, so okay. It's a very good question actually. So how many Cucumber tests? We are doing the testing for 5 years or so. So I don't count. I think each of project has at least 1,000 tests. I mean the real production project. But projects basically are not very big because of like social games are not so big because we have developed reusable libraries and we just need to do custom things there. And basically we mostly use ASPEC because Cucumber is mostly used for testing at acceptance level at the browser level, and in games, which we do a lot of games actually, like maybe 70% of our projects are games. Games has a lot of random factors. You know, if you ever played games, there are a lot of random events. So it's very hard to mock up the code so that it behaves exactly like a tester expects. So, for example, imagine like if you have something like Facebook Cityville game, and there are at random chance at 3% that some item drops. Just you get a random item when you collect money. So your test will run at 97%, right? And then it will fail at 3% if you don't do that hacking and mocking at the application level. So we are a bit skeptical about putting test-related code to production code. So we don't test with Cucumber a lot. We test much more with ASPEC, and the ASPEC accesses the Ruby environment. So it means you can tune the things at runtime. I mean, tune objects. So you can tune and stub those random factors much easier with ASPEC. So ASPEC tests are our favorite. Okay, so we have, I think, couple of few minutes, and I'll show you funny demo. It's the Cucumber supports a lot of languages. It supports Lithuanian too, so we can check how test looks in Lithuanian. Okay, so the test in Lithuanian. And it's fully executable. Oh, there is a nice Cucumber feature with the tables. You can run the same test if you use those things embedded. I forgot how it's called, but you can just define with those marks, and you can define such table, and that same test will be run as much as rows in that table. So it's easier to do the tests that are very similar. It's much nicer to do in such table, and there's even more fun. LOL language. There's stuffing feature. This one is nice too. And it actually runs. Yep, okay, it's all green, passes. Oh, there is actually, it's running all the languages. We need to go to that directory. Okay, this runs. So if you want to scare your boss, you can use cucumber in this language. Okay, so that's all what I wanted to show today.